Hello, who's watching this? My name is Amina, and today I'm doing a little story time video. So that's nice. If you hear my fan, that's because my room is like a bazillion degrees right now, and I need it to cool down. I don't really do story time videos, but this weekend something very bad happened, and did not do anything good for me, but I feel like I'm gonna be more careful cooking now because I almost caught my house on fire. This is a fairly recent story as it happened the past weekend. So what happened was, it was my cousin's birthday party. My cousin's like a small child, and a couple months ago I made fried pickles, except I used like a frying pan on the stove because we didn't have a fryer, but I didn't like put a lot of oil in it and it didn't turn out that well, but she ended up liking it, and I guess she asked for it for her birthday, or was like talking about it before. So my aunt was just like, oh, just bring it to her birthday. So I was like, okay. So at first I was like, oh, I don't want to make this, like I'm not in the mood. Then I was like telling my mom how like we don't have a fryer and how last time it didn't like sit right or fry right because we didn't have a fryer and I used a pan. So she's like told me that there's this pot on the stove and the pot has oil in it. So I was like, okay. And I was like, do you want me to use that? And I was like, how do I do it? And she was like, just put it on like a low temperature, like 6 or 7. So I put it on, I think I put it on 6, and she's like, just let the oil warm up for a couple of minutes and then start putting the stuff in. So while I had the stove on and the oil warming up, I was like putting the batter on the pickles so that I could fry them, because you don't just like put them in the fryer, like you roll them in cornstarch and then other seasonings that you want, but cornstarch is like the main thing so that it fries right and has like a breading on it. So I was doing that, and all of a sudden I realized smoke was coming out of the pot, and since I've never done this before, I kept the lid on the pot. I just moved the pot because when my mom like cooked it, she would have the lid on it and that's like all I would see. But when the oil was like warming up, and like for the most part of it the lid was not on it, but I never saw that part. I always just saw it with the lid on, so I just assumed that was how you cook it. Well, little did I know. I open up the thing and then fire literally like shoots out at my face. Like it literally shoots out, and I was like freaking out, and I like screamed so loud. Like this is like probably the most terrified I'd ever been in my entire life. My mom was like in the shower while this was happening, so I slammed the lid back on. I couldn't like reach over because there's still like fire and smoke coming out of the pot because the lid wasn't completely on. It was just like pretty much covering all of it, so I couldn't turn the stove off. So I ran upstairs and got my mom, and she just assumed it was gonna be like a small fire, that she could get it out with the fire extinguisher. So she grabs a fire extinguisher and she, you know, does that thing, and she's like okay, and at this point, like obviously she like just got out of the shower, and I felt so bad. And then everything in the kitchen went black. Like all the smoke was just black coming out of the pot, and the fire came back, and the fire extinguisher stopped working, and our flour is at the bottom of our sink. So our sink's like across from the stove, and it was like really black in that entire area surrounding the stove. So it'd be like really hard to get it, and then our flour is at the very bottom of like under the sink, and there's a bunch of stuff stacked on top, so it would have like been a complete mess. We wouldn't have been able to do it. So I called 911 obviously because the fire wasn't going out, and it wasn't like, because when I was down there it was a really small fire, but it was like growing, like nothing else caught on fire. It was only that pot, but it was growing on the pot. The fire department came, and my mom, like, we were talking to them, and they're like, oh, you did good, like, covering it up. And I was like, yeah, but, like, I don't know. That's pretty much all of it. Like, there's still smoke damage. I'll, like, insert some pictures so that you know it's legit. Like, this actually happened. But there's no like damage to the kitchen, really. Like, we just had to repaint it and clean. Yeah, that's the story about how I almost caught my house on fire. So hope you enjoyed. Now, I don't know, I feel like this isn't long enough for a story time because these are supposed to be interesting, so it's gonna be like 2 stories in one. And this is another recent thing that happened, and this was when I experienced sleep paralysis. And I think that's how you pronounce it, but basically, if you don't know, it's like being paralyzed in your sleep because your brain is not ready to be woken up and your muscles are like still asleep and your brain's not sending signals to wake them up. So I was watching kids, and this sounds like really bad. Like, I'm a good babysitter, I promise. Like, I'd never sleep on the job or anything. But at this point, one of them was, you know, playing video games, whatever. The other was just sitting watching TV, and I blinked, and I don't remember falling asleep. I just remember the last thing was watching some Disney show that's like popular now, and then bam, lights out. And then I could like hear everything going on though. I could hear every single thing, and it seemed so much louder than it really was. I don't know how, it just seemed like really loud and like chirpy, and it was so weird. Like, I felt like I was dying, but I couldn't move, and I was like, okay, just move like your fist, or move this, or open your eyes at least, like do something. But I couldn't. And I heard one of them get water, but like everything else was silent, and I just heard them like getting water from the sink or the fridge or whatever they got the water from. And I was like, oh, say something to them, like say, are you doing okay? Because obviously I'm just like passed out on this couch right now, and I just couldn't do anything, and I was freaking out. And then later I realized that the more you freak out, the harder it's gonna be, because it's like sending more like confusion to your brain. So yeah. And when I woke up, I found out it was like only 5 minutes, but I felt like it was hours that I was like in this weird state. Like, it's so weird, but it's like a completely normal thing to experience. But most people experience it in like the middle of the night, but I experienced it in the middle of the day when I was watching kids, and it like randomly happened. Like, I don't know what happened still. Like, I only know that I went in this weird state. So yeah, that's like the shorter story. But yeah, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.